Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/WTech. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Washington Tech Policy Podcast, episode number 15.
Moving the needle. Welcome to the Washington Tech Policy Podcast.
Curating communications, media, and tech policy news so you don't have to. News, interviews, everything you need without the axe to grind. It's the Washington Tech Policy Podcast with Joe Miller.
Washington prepares for Friday's oral arguments on the FCC's net neutrality rules, school broadband rates improve, and Bilodeau Overdeck joins me on the show. We saw last week that Comcast has launched its new Stream TV over one of its cable channels, which allows Comcast subscribers to access unlimited streaming content via one of Comcast's cable channels rather than the internet. This can help customers avoid the additional bandwidth fees they have to pay when they exceed their data caps, streaming content on applications like Netflix or Hulu. Comcast argues Stream TV utilizes a cable channel rather than the internet and is therefore not subject to the FCC's net neutrality rules. However, the public interest group Public Knowledge disagrees. The group's senior staff attorney John Bergmeyer wrote last week, quote, "From a user's perspective, Stream TV is identical to any other internet service," end quote. Bergmeyer said Stream TV is a perfect example of zero rating, the practice of internet service providers not charging for data usage for specific applications, a practice not banned by the FCC's net neutrality rules. Also on the net neutrality front, some cloud texting firms like Twilio are advocating at the FCC for texting service to be treated like a common carrier service, thereby subjecting it to the net neutrality rules. Classifying texting as a common carrier service would make it illegal for wireless carriers to prioritize their texting services over those of cloud texting providers. But CTIA, the Wireless Association, argues these cloud-based services are unfiltered, high bandwidth, and more susceptible to spammers. The debate was prompted by a petition filed by Public Knowledge asking the FCC to issue a declaratory judgment stating that text messaging is a Title II common carrier service. Reply comments in the proceeding, WT docket 08-7, are due on December 21st. This coming Friday, December 4th, the U.S. Court of Appeals will hear oral arguments on the net neutrality rules the FCC passed earlier this year. The nonprofit Education Superhighway released a new report showing that while the number of students without high-speed internet access has declined by almost half since 2013, 20 million students still lack access to broadband at school. Last year, the FCC invested an additional $2.5 billion to modernize the E-rate program to fund broadband in schools. Charter released a report showing it could control 23% of the broadband market following a merger with Time Warner Cable. However, this figure has been criticized by some for not taking account of the effect Time Warner Cable's planned upgrades will have on the combined company's market share. The German-based company Deutsche Telekom, of which T-Mobile is a subsidiary, has a sexual harassment reporting policy in place in which employees are required to report sexual harassment to company officials only and maintain the confidentiality of employees in the investigation or risk losing their jobs. However, this policy is inconsistent with a recent decision by the U.S. National Labor Relations Board, which ruled the policy was illegal in Maine and South Carolina. So last week, 25 congresswomen wrote a letter to German Chancellor Angela Merkel requesting that she call on Deutsche Telekom to rescind the policy because it still affects employees in other states here in the U.S. An FAA task force recommended that drone owners register their drones in a national database. The long-awaited set of recommendations is broadly applauded by companies like Amazon, GoPro, and Google, as well as the Consumer Electronics Association. However, some argue the registration requirement should only apply to drones weighing over 1 kilogram, or about 2.2 pounds, rather than the current threshold of just 250 grams, which is only about a half a pound. The House Energy and Commerce Committee will hold a hearing today in Rayburn, room 2322, on mobile payments. The Department of Justice is examining Comcast's spot sales practices and share of the spot sales market. Spot selling involves companies who are not necessarily subject to the FCC's jurisdiction engaged in the selling of advertising time on cable channels like ESPN or BET. The DOJ is concerned about the antitrust implications of Comcast engaging in spot selling, not just for its own cable channels, but also for cable channels owned by other companies. Finally, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit has transferred to the Third Circuit a challenge to the FCC's media ownership rules, including the recent restrictions the FCC placed on joint sales agreements. John Egerton has more over at Broadcasting and Cable. Stay with us. For you, my dear listeners of the Washington Tech Policy Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. How about Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes? You can download Year of Yes or another audiobook free by trying audible.com. Sign up for your free audiobook and 30-day trial today at audibletrial.com/WTech. My guest today is Laura Overdeck, founder and president of Bedtime Math Foundation, a nonprofit that seeks to make math a fun part of kids' everyday lives and as beloved an activity as the bedtime story. Bedtime Math offers a playful math problem daily for free, which engages both parents and kids while putting math on equal footing with literacy. In its first few months of existence, Bedtime Math increased its regular following from 30 families to well over 20,000 and garnered national press coverage. Laura knows a little something about numbers. As a child, she sat and memorized perfect squares for fun back before it was cool. She went on to get her BA in astrophysics from Princeton University and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business and continues to stargaze today. In addition to her work with Bedtime Math, Laura currently serves as chair of the advisory board for Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth, CTY, and as a trustee of Liberty Science Center at Drew University and the Governor's School of New Jersey. When not playing with numbers, Laura's other interests include her 3 lively children, chocolate, wine, extreme gravity stunts, and Lego Mindstorms. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You know, I found out about your work on NPR not too long ago and rushed out immediately and bought your book, Bedtime Math, for my own kids right away. And I have to tell you, I read it to my 6-year-old, and every time I do, her eyes just light up, even into the next morning when she starts teaching back what she learned the night before from your books. It's a tremendous resource. And I know down the road, I'm going to need even more resources like this, so I'm glad you're here early. I don't have, the anxiety around math hasn't set in yet, but I'm a little concerned that, down the road when the math starts getting more and more advanced, that, I may need a resource to help my kids with their math assignments. So, I appreciate you and glad that you've started the ball rolling on this. But I'd love to find out, a little bit more from you, kind of in broad strokes, what Bedtime Math is, and what was sort of the aha moment when you decided that you wanted to write Bedtime Math and establish your nonprofit?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm so glad to hear that your daughter's enjoying the book, because that is exactly the whole goal, which is to get kids to love math before they are afraid of it, because we hope to fend that off. It started in a very premeditated way. My husband and I, when my daughter was 2, just started rolling in a math problem with her bedtime story every night. Culturally, we all know to read to kids at night, and that results in kids growing up and loving books and reading for pleasure. We don't really have math for pleasure. And, when we'd give her bedtime story. We just started doing a math problem also because we both love math. And as she got older, it got more complicated. We had started with counting stuffed animals. We rolled in addition, then we rolled in subtraction. We rolled in a second child, then we rolled in a third child. And the aha moment was when my youngest, when he turned 2, came running in one night yelling that he wanted his own math problem. And we realized that in our house, math was like dessert. He saw his brother and sister having fun with it, and he just figured it was his turn. And that was in very sharp contrast to what we see going on around us, where there is so much hand-wringing and arguing about how to teach math and what a terrible job we're doing as a country, and how so many kids have anxiety over math, how so many adults, people are really nervous about numbers, and we would love to turn around that culture.
And so what are we talking about here in terms of numbers when it comes to science, technology, engineering, and math achievement, particularly when it comes to girls? What are some of the disparities there?
Well, interestingly, kids all come into school on an even, or at least boys versus girls, they come in with equal ability, and girls actually keep pace with boys all the way through. But we have an undercurrent of signaling that goes on that tells girls they're not good at math. There have been some pretty shocking studies showing how teachers, without even realizing it, signal that they look at boys and girls differently as far as math. One is that when a boy is good at math, the teacher says, oh, you're good at math. But when a girl is excelling, they say, oh, well, she's working really hard at it. That kind of language does get picked up by kids. It's also been shown that if you take a series of test grades and show them to a teacher and say, does this kid look like somebody who's going to go on in math or do a good job in math and science, the teacher judges it differently based on whether there's a boy's name on the paper or a girl's name. And it's actually the exact same grades and test scores, but they will look at the boy one and say, oh, yeah, he could do fine. So, this is research that has shown this. And I think that we have to snap that generational repeating cycle that we have where kids grow up thinking that way about math. They become adults and they become parents and teachers, and it's inadvertently then being fed contagiously, to the next generation. And we're trying to break that link. Here at Bedtime Math, we're trying to get parents who don't like math to raise kids who do. And that's why we work so hard to make the math problems and all our content and our after-school math club really playful and lively and fun. And what's exciting is we've had parents write into us saying that when they do the math problem with their kids, this is the first time they're enjoying math. These parents have gone, decades not liking math. And what's happening is that they're finally starting from scratch again with their own kids and seeing that numbers really are fun.
So I want to go back to the idea of, you mentioned that teachers are saying that girls, they worked hard, but they tell boys, you're really good at math. So I guess as a parent, I'm trying to figure out for myself how to message to my own daughters, because there's research coming out of Stanford, University of Pennsylvania, Martin Seligman and Carol Dweck around really trying to emphasize and teach kids to be more optimistic about their learning by praising their level of hard work rather than their level of innate ability. So I'm kind of on the fence as to what to do about it, because I know for math it's actually better to say that they're innately good at math. So
that is very interesting. Carol Dweck's work is really fascinating. I think that it's important for kids to know that wherever they are in a skill, that they can always do more, that they can always stretch. And I don't know exactly how that ties in with the signaling that teachers are doing and what the exact wording is of what teachers are saying. It has been shown, and this just came out a couple of weeks ago, that one of the biggest determinants of whether kids at age 14 are good at math is whether they view themselves as mathematicians. It's called math self-concept. And when kids think they're good at math, all else being equal, they will be more comfortable and do better on the next step. I think it's important for teachers who are, 90% of teachers are female, and it's been shown that elementary education majors coming out of college are one of the most math-phobic groups of kids coming out of our colleges. They go on and teach. If they're feeling uncomfortable with math, they're going to signal that to the kids. And so the teachers, given that they're female, they're going to have a bigger effect on their girl students than boy students. So I'm not sure exactly what the wording is and what they're saying, but there's a signaling going on where the teachers are expecting the girls kind of to follow in their own footsteps and end up not liking math, and they're not thinking that about the boys. And that's what we have to change.
And what are some of the other influences that are affecting the way girls and boys, for that matter, how they think about their math ability and how they develop an interest in math or don't develop an interest in math? Are there media influences, parental influences? What are some of the other behavioral triggers out there?
I was going to say, as much as teachers it may inadvertently be affecting their students this way, and I really do believe it's subconscious. I don't think it's deliberate. But we have to remember that kids spend a lot more time awake outside school than in it. We live 8,800 hours in a year, roughly. Of those 8,800 hours, elementary school kids spend about 1,200 in school. All the rest of it is outside school. And even if you chop out maybe 2,000 or 3,000 hours for sleep, that they're still awake outside school about 4 times as many hours as they are in school. So what goes on outside school, frankly, is far more important. And that's where the parent has a huge impact. A lot of parents feel nervous helping their kids with their math homework, starting as early as 3rd grade. And, parents with resources can hire tutors, but even so, they're signaling to their kids that they're uncomfortable and that they're not going to be able to sit and take the time. And then a lot of parents don't have the resources for that, and then the kid is really left floundering. And it's so important in those early years for kids to grasp the fundamentals, because really everything else builds from that. That study that showed that one's view of oneself as a mathematician affects kids' ability, another factor that was shown to play an even bigger role was simply had they made it through fractions. Fractions in 4th grade, that's a real point where a lot of kids fall off the cliff and stop liking math. And that's because studies have shown that teachers are often uncomfortable with fractions. And, when you're uncomfortable, you have to just say to kids, hey, here are the algorithms. When you add fractions, make sure the bottoms are the same. But when you multiply them, you don't need to. Kids can't just sit and memorize all these rules. They have to really understand what's going on when you add those pieces versus when you're multiplying them or when you're dividing them. And when parents and teachers understand what's going on with that and can really explain, that's what makes a kid math fluent, and that's what makes them feel confident. I think the parents are just as much, a part of this as the teachers, because kids go home and that's their opportunity to get one-on-one attention. It's not in the classroom.
Well, that's
the homework is where is actually, and I don't think kids should have a lot of homework, but I think that homework should be really meaningful, and it's an opportunity to get over whatever hurdles they didn't clear, during the school day.
So now kids are smart. They know when you're blowing smoke. You say so.
Yeah.
So I mean, to tell them that they're good at math, and so then they may or may not believe it. What are some kind of stealth ways we can get them to believe in their math ability? Yeah,
I agree that you can't tell kids they're good at it if they're not. But it's not really a matter of being innately good at it. Again, this gets back to Carol Dweck with the growth mindset. I think it's important to tell kids they can get there. They can do it. That, lots of kids around the country every year are going to master some of these skills and really be able to do it, and that this kid can also. I do think that one thing that's not true is that a child can master a topic if the topics before it have not been mastered. And this is where the one-on-one attention and really figuring out where the gaps are is so important. Because if a kid really is not solid with their multiplying single digits, they can't really do fractions yet. They really have to have an understanding of the basics before they dive into that. saying to a child, you know what, as long as we go back and we start from the beginning, you can learn all of this. That's really the message we have to send. And then the question is just, how do you do that for millions of kids? Because it's very hard to do that in a classroom of 24 children.
So, Laura, you're an astrophysicist at a Princeton grad. What are some early experiences that you had as a child that you still recall that really inspired you to excel at math and science?
Well, I really think that my parents had a huge role in this I don't know if they even realized it at the time. First of all, I had two parents who liked math. My mom, interestingly, is an English teacher, but she likes math and is very comfortable with it. She just happened to love English and go on in that. And my dad, being a West Point grad, had an engineering background, and then he worked in finance. So both of them very comfortable with math. The second notable thing is we had no flashcards or worksheets in my house. The way math worked itself into our lives was through my parents' hobbies. My mom loved to bake, and from an early age I was in there making stuff with her. And when you're handling all the teaspoons, tablespoons, quarter cup, half cup, you're learning your fractions and your ratios. It gets into your system. And then my dad, being from a long line of carpenters, he did carpentry as a hobby. And, he had me at an early age using very unsafe tools in the workshop, saws and drills. And, you're working with eighths of an inch, sixteenths of an inch. Again, you're just feeling how numbers are very real and tangible and how they're just part of everything we do. So I grew up with that just as a steady undercurrent in my childhood. And I think that was huge because I just never was nervous about math as a kid in school.
I want a carpentry shop. I don't have one yet. I think my garage is too small, but I may do it. I don't know. But
it's the maker thing. The whole maker movement is great because it gets kids doing hands-on things and just seeing all the amazing things you can make. And the more we can work math and spatial relations, all that stuff in there, the better.
Tell me about the last book you read, Laura, that really resonated with you, that you feel compelled to recommend to basically everyone you meet.
There are two. One is I read The One World Schoolhouse by Sal Khan, who founded Khan Academy. And I know Sal, and I've admired his work for a long time. But the book just is an incredible summary of so many basic ideas in our education system and things that we need to change. One of the big ones is this idea of gaps in kids' learning, especially in math, and how hard it is to move on in math if you have those gaps. And he also makes a really basic point of how come it's okay to get a B or a C on a quiz and move on to the next topic. If you only understand it 75% or 80% of the way, why is that okay? You really need to master it and move on. You shouldn't move on to the next topic till you have a 95. And that's how his website works when you do the problem sets. It's just such a basic statement, and then you realize, wow, that is not how we do things in our schools. How great would it be if no one ever moved on to the next topic till they really got it? The book is full of gems like that. I just think it's great. On the child book front, one book I read recently with my kids is One Guinea Pig is Not Enough. If you're looking for a great counting book, I love this book because there are other counting books out there, and they're all kind of the same because they're all counting from 1 to 10. But this one's just really clever and cute because it works in different personality traits of the guinea pigs as they keep adding to the pile, and it's just very clever and fun. So those are my two recent favorites.
So, Laura, you're obviously very busy with your books, not to mention the foundation and your other work. What are some productivity hacks you use to stay on top of your game? And they can be apps or particular ways you structure your day. How do you keep churning out content so consistently in addition to accomplishing all of the other things that go into being a social entrepreneur?
Well, at a high level, I am not a perfectionist. I do not believe in agonizing over things much, so I do move through decisions pretty quickly, and I have a pretty jam-packed day as a result. I really pack in a lot of things, and I do them quickly. And that's basically the 80-20 rule. The first 20% of time you put into something is going to get you 80% of the way there. And as you put in more time, marginally you're gaining less and less. As far as how that applies to writing, for those who write regularly, it's really important to just crank out the first draft and then let it sit and go back to it, because those two chunks of time added together will be much less than sitting with writer's block and wrangling over a piece for hours and hours. So given that I write a daily blog, I have to move through them fast. So that's helped me a lot.
Well, thanks, Laura, and you've been so gracious to join me today on the show. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave with the audience? Does that sound like you're going to the gallows? Maybe I shouldn't phrase it that way. Do you have any final any final words of wisdom you'd like to leave with the audience?
I just think that whether someone has kids or not, that it's important to think of math as playful and recreational. I think our whole society would benefit from some more lightheartedness around the subject, and moving on from thinking of it as just this dry, isolated school subject, because math does tie in with everything. And I think that signaling to the next generation that math is fun, that it might be something you do outside school. That's why we have Crazy Eights Math Club that we launched here at Bedtime Math. We just got our 5,000th order, and we only launched it a year ago. So that's like 80 or 90,000 kids doing math club after school. And we've heard that there's a wait list at a lot of schools. Wait list for math club is just unheard of. So we feel like we're finally cracking this nut and getting, at least getting kids to see, hey, this isn't just something you do in school. This is something you can have fun with outside in the other parts of your life. So we hope that it will keep growing and that we can keep moving in that direction.
Thanks so much for your time, Laura.
Oh, and thank you for having me on the show.
That concludes episode 15 of the podcast. Thanks so much to all of you for listening. I can't do any of this without you, so thank you. If you're new to the podcast, or even if you've been listening for a while, I have a free cheat sheet for all of my new email subscribers, and you can find the sign up for that at washingtech.com/cheat sheet. And that cheat sheet is a guide for you to get up to speed on various different policy areas, including cybersecurity, intellectual property, net neutrality, and other areas. It's a quick reference anytime you're preparing for a meeting or writing something you need citations for. That's washingtech.com/cheat sheet. Thanks again to all of you for listening. I'll see you back here next week.
Thanks for listening to the Washing Tech Policy Podcast. You've been briefed.